That take was wild. Bro, you out of your mind. Guess we're really doing this.
Oh, step in, tune up, let the sparks fly quick. Hot takes tossing like a fast break flick. Big break down the chaos, call out the blaze. Every headline flipped in 100 ways. Pushes slants hard when the pressure gets big. Shots get fired, who's right, take a pick. Lamps turn loud, tension gets loud too. Nobody better get down there seeing this through. Party on this monster, say what you feel. Party on this monster, shots to conceal. Party on this monster, always for real. Every week, every day, they spin that wheel.
This is Pardon the Disruption.
All right, we are live once again with Pardon the Disruption, episode 4, pre-conference championship week. Glad to be back with everybody. I'm joined by D. Kane, Drew Baca, and Vic today. And yeah, glad to have everybody back. I'm glad to be back. Glad to be in better health than I once was. So I'm excited to get to some of our topics today. We'll be doing a breakdown of some of the CCG games that we'll be seeing this upcoming week. Talking a little bit about the end of season surprises and some underperformances. Talking about some of the strong G5 teams that we've been seeing cracking into the top 25, and just generally talking about how to cover different teams' bubble resumes for the CFP, how sim losses may impact a team, how coach turnover may impact a team, and all that good stuff. So we'll get underway here with the conference championship week, a little bit of a preview. So with conference championship week around the corner, are there any teams that you guys see playing spoiler in the championship games or potentially being underdogs that may pull through with an upset? And if that happens, how do you see the CFP field shaking up and changing? Are there any teams that you think would drop a significant amount with a loss or potentially have to be left out altogether that weren't initially? So I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on how CCG week is going to pan out. So let's start with D. Kane if you're open to giving the first thoughts on this topic.
Okay, not a problem. First off, I'd like to just say welcome back to everybody again. I've actually missed talking to you guys, so it's kind of fun that we are back together. With CCG week around the corner, um, honestly, looking at some of these games, there's not a whole lot that's like just like popping, like surprising, except for maybe Rutgers. Rutgers is a little shocking there. But I mean, MJ Kemp, he's not a bad coach. We've seen him do good things with other schools. Um, but one of the games that I am looking forward to is in my conference, actually, the MAC, because it's going to be a rematch against Buffalo and you, and that should be really, really good. As far as one CCG that I think if the team loses, it could knock them out, it would be in the ACC, with Duke sitting at 13 currently. I feel like they're like right there at the cusp. But if they lose that CCG game, then that's it. They have no way of getting in. That's just out of the ones that I've seen so far. The only other one that might be a surpriser to shake things up is if BYU happens to miraculously, get one over on Paxi, which I don't see that happening. No knock against Ryan, but I mean Paxi has that team pretty figured out, and yeah, I don't see that happening. But if that were to happen, that would be a game that would kind of shake things up because they're currently unranked. They're currently 8-4 on the season. You know, and if they win, they would be the Big 12 champs. So, do they get that in, or is it gonna fall to the next highest conference champion, which would be one of these outliers in the G5 schools? Which, by my opinion, the G5 schools right now, there's nothing that's a surprise. I mean, they're solid schools with solid coaches. For them not to be there, would be a shocker. From what I'm seeing, looking over the schedules and the rankings, the standings currently, everything seems to be lining up the way that it makes sense.
Yeah, I think I gotta agree with that. Um, to your point about BYU, that'll be an interesting outcome if BYU pulls off the upset. It's not entirely out of the question. Uh, BYU and Utah, they played earlier in the season. I think BYU was on the road for that one. It was about a 10-point loss or so. So it's not entirely out of the question. I believe they'll be on the road again for this conference championship because thanks to how CFB 26 is set up, there's no neutral site or any bowl games or any of that fun stuff. So Utah will have the home field advantage as far as I'm aware again. Um, but yeah, to your point, if they pull off the win, BYU doesn't have that bad of a resume, especially if they beat Utah. So in terms of comparing them to say like the second place G5 team, I think even though they're unranked right now, we could probably see them get catapulted quite a bit by the CFP committee to where they would be stronger than the second G5 auto bid. Because you'll have a split result with Utah, one win, one loss. You won't have any losses by more than that 10-point road loss, and it'll all be to solid teams. Utah ranked, Michigan State ranked, Georgia Tech. Um, in my opinion, deserves to be at least considered on the bubble for ranked and at least in the conversation for one of the stronger teams in the league. Vanderbilt, as though although they've had a rough schedule, the strength of schedule has been really tough, and they're still pretty close to top 50 in the Massey. So really no bad losses for BYU despite being 8-4 right now. So I think that's argument enough for them to be in the CFP auto bid conversation as one of those top conference champions. Uh, Drew, do you got any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the MAC game as well. I think you really do have to go there just based on the fact that if everything holds serve, I think we can all probably agree Central Michigan will stay as the G5 rep. So realistically, Buffalo and Andy have the only shot to shake things up there. And I know that Andy took a loss earlier in the season, Central, but that Buffalo team is still pretty wild, actually. I mean, they've got a 92 overall middle linebacker, and then their top halfback and top two wide receivers are all both 87 overall. So it's not as if Buffalo's lacking. And, we all know Andy is a strong competitor. So um, I'm sure a lot of people have the result of that one already kind of penciled in their mind as BMU. But um, that result right there would definitely shake things up. Um, the other one that I'm looking at that's interesting to me is SEC in Florida versus Arkansas. So again, one team obviously outclasses the other there, but I think we all know that Coach Devin Higgins for the last couple of seasons has lit up the resume board of high-end teams with losses. So I certainly don't think you can count that guy out. And from the committee's January 10th ranking, I see that they already had them slotted in. And so we've already got our first three-loss team into the CFP. I think since we came back to season 29, and I don't know what they would land at, but man, if they were to take it to Florida and win that, I don't even know how you end up seeing these, but that definitely impacts everybody, right? Because it's not just that Arkansas moves up, then you're going to see other guys slide down, and that's going to completely change, their potential first round matchup, uh, and how that all plays out. So you could find a team that may have had the eighth seed in a home game in the first round. If Arkansas goes out and wins, it's suddenly the ninth seed and looking at a road game, which is a huge deal. So, I would never put juju on anybody and predict an outcome here, but if those two were to see any kind of chaos, those two matchups right there to me would be the most talking point for the F3 community.
Yeah, 100%. Vic, what do you got for us? What are your thoughts?
I'm most looking forward to the American title game between ECU and USF. I know it's still a tiebreaker to be dissolved there, but I believe that's how it's going to go. That game is important just in case the MAC title game goes a different way. If Andy gets his revenge on Chip in the MAC title game, then whoever wins the American could possibly get that G5 CFP spot. The other thing is the ultimate domino piece is Arkansas beating Florida. Everybody is that's going to affect everybody. If Florida loses, it affects everybody. It affects almost every at-large team because Florida then becomes the most important at-large team in the field. Um, Utah and BYU, I don't see BYU upsetting Utah, but you never know. And if that was the case, then all hell may break loose. But I don't see that happening at all. But those are the things I'm looking at during the conference championship game.
Vic, I got a question for you. To the other group in general, really, but you brought up the American, and if for some reason Buffalo would be able to knock off CMU, I just got to know what your guys' thoughts are. Do you think CMU going down automatically, I shouldn't say automatically, but more so favors the American champion? Or does anybody see Buffalo at then 12-1 with a quad one win on their resume, which I'm not sure about the other teams where they stand, but would a 12-1 Buffalo with a conference championship and a quad one win be enough for you, despite the rest of the resume, to put them in the CFP at the G5?
It could be possibly enough, but we'll have to see how Andy beats Chip. Like if he blows him out like Chip blew him out, then then you definitely have to consider that if you're the committee. But if it's a close game and he barely beats him, then you have to question it. But I think that if Andy does beat Chip, it definitely opens the door for the American champion, especially if that American champion is ECU, because you'll have a favorable record between both teams. You'll have a 12-1 ECU and a 12-1 Buffalo.
Yeah, it would be hard to, well, I mean, neither resume is fantastic, but again, the teams played who they had in front of them. And I do think that, at top to bottom, we would all agree that the American is stronger. So, um, yeah, I do think that's a hard one because I think that there would be room to call Andy's win over Chip the best, of those G5 teams wins. That early season NC State game for ECU looked good initially based off of last season, but obviously their season didn't go as planned. So um, even though there's lacking in a signature win from ECU, I definitely think top to bottom is a stronger resume. So I would just be curious to see how, at that point, if this were to play out, what the committee would um, weight a recent good win versus an overall resume that may be a little stronger. It'll be interesting.
Now, I'm listening to you guys about some of these shakeups and stuff, and a lot of times I try not to come off as disrespectful to coaches. I don't mean this in a disrespectful way by any means necessary. But if you guys think for 1 second that Arkansas is beating Florida, I'm gonna have to send all of you some psyche evals, like seriously, and some drug tests, because um, I mean, Devin's a solid coach, but there's a reason Jiggy hasn't lost yet with Florida. Okay, and it's not gonna happen. It's not. I would stake money that Jiggy does not lose that game unless somebody is paying Jiggy to lose that game, and that's only because Jiggy has his offense and his defense locked in, locked in, and they're playing at the Swamp.
I mean, I'm not saying that Arkansas is definitely going to. My thing is if you never,
I
and
see.
plus
I don't.
with Devin, you never know. You never know with Devin. It's a if. It's definitely an if because you never know.
I think the other thing is because I don't really consider myself all that great, and I play Devin, and yeah, um, if I can beat Devin, I'm pretty sure.
I would say you're probably right, DK. And I mean, it is what it is. I would say, I mean, Devin did beat LSU. It's not that he can't win those big games. He absolutely can. I think we all know what a juggernaut Jiggy is. Um, the only thing I would say is that Devin really doesn't have anything to lose, right? I mean, right now he's slotted in that last ranking at the 10 seed. A loss is going to absolutely throw him out of there. But right now he is in the playoffs. So he's obviously fighting for his very life in this CFP, whereas Florida is absolutely locked in. So, not saying that Jiggy would ever take his foot off the gas either, but I think you can probably expect Devin to come out redlining the throttle. Uh, Again, it is a game, a little different than real life. You never know how the bounces could go. I think probably the bounces in real life are a little more unpredictable than here in the game to a certain degree. But hey, he can force a turnover too. We know that the guy can score. I mean, he's been putting up points all season. So um, I think you're right, but I think that there's a less than zero chance that he pulls off the upset.
I'm just really keeping the band with y'all. I'm trying to put some fire under Devin to have that man like amped up and angry, come out there and start
Go
slanking the
ahead.
rock. That's all. Even though I'm not gonna lie, that one little there's only one game that concerned me when I look at Devin's resume. And that's the game against. That was the only one that concerned me. 'Cause, yeah. But at the same time, like I said, I don't really always look at just the team. I look at the coach who has the teams because there's coaches who can take some teams in their skills as well as their ability to come up with schemes can make up for some of the deficits that those teams have. So, and Roke has definitely done that with Mississippi State as well as Devin with Arkansas. I mean, because it's not that they are honestly, they're not even a mid-tier team in the SEC, but he
Bottom
has
tier.
them up to where
Bottom
they
tier.
are. Yeah, and he has them up to where they are. So kudos for him for the work that he's put in, and I'm hoping that it's a good game, regardless of how it turns out. Which typically you have in these series. There's not really many that I can recall seeing that have been like absolute, blowouts or anything like that. But I mean, we're all excited and waiting to see what happens and how everything turns out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like there's so much to talk about with the conference championship week and how many different scenarios could lead to teams getting in and out. How much losing a conference championship game would impact you if you're near the bubble already. I feel like we could take up the entire session talking about some of these games, but I want to move on to the next topic. If that's all right with everybody else.
Indiana,
Uh,
but
so
what happened?
I want to talk next just about, generally speaking, are there any surprises or disappointments gearing down to the end of the season that you thought relative to your preseason expectations, how teams performed, or if there's any one particular coach that impressed you the most with their skills on the sticks.
Oh,
I can go first. I can go
please
first
do.
on this one. Uh, as far as disappointing and surprising, I can go with a lot of people,
Hmm.
and I'm probably gonna name them in the midst of this. But the two people that are on the stage with me, uh, scrimmage and DK a lot before the season with Vandy. I thought he was going to have an excellent season, but it did not turn out that way. He did have a murderer's row of a schedule, but it did not turn out that way for him. And of course, the surprise is Drew Baca going to a bowl game. I love it. I completely love it. Of course, MJ Kemp with Rutgers, that was a little bit of a surprise. Knowles getting the upset with Minnesota over Oregon, that was a surprise. RB with Wisconsin is a surprise. We already talked about Devin and Rock with Mississippi State and Arkansas. That was a surprise. A G5 surprise is Coach Priest at Ohio. Even though he is 7-5, he went 7-1 in the MAC. That's very, very surprising right there. So there's just a few names off the list right there.
Well, I
think,
don't know if
uh,
I should start from the top or the bottom, but um, you know what? I can't say surprises as far as the positive surprises as much because he he's already listed off quite a few. BYU, just to add to the list, that was a surprise with their season. As far as I I list for disappointments are probably a lot higher. Okay, um, it's Corey, I love you to death, man, but you can't be doing our team like that. Miami, that was a heartbreaker right there. Looking at them fall as far as they did on the season. Indiana, I thought Mike would have put together a little bit more of a system with that team with the weapons that he had. Um, but I mean, honestly, it's this game. This game is trash. But anyways, also going a little bit further down. What was it that I just saw that I because we were just talking. Oh yeah, I will mention my season. I look, man, I took Vandy because they had a two win goal, and that's all I was hoping for. Um, but the Texas, CG thought that they would have been a little bit higher in the conversation than where they were. Mort started out really, really well. Sad to see that he's not up in the top three. Um, and I think it was one other ACC team. Oh, Swole. Believe it or not, with Louisville, that was still a solid being able to make it to a bowl game with them. Um, Georgia Tech's team, we expected him to do decent with that team with the weapons that he had on offense, and seeing them with an 8-3 season so far, that's pretty good. And actually seeing Chase with VTech get the ball really rolling after the start that he had, and even being in the conversation possibly with the CCG game at 7-1 in the conference. That was a good turnaround for them as well. I think that's pretty much it for my surprises. Yeah.
Drew, you got anything?
yeah. Um, so a good one, I would say Temple. One of the least thought out teams in the American Conference. Draft wise, I think they go later than even Navy and Army usually, which to me that takes a specific type of person to run. So it's kind of surprising to sometimes see that. But uh, 10-2 with a high powered offense, huge, definitely out performed expectations there. I think. Um, it was already mentioned, but I just want to shout out RB again. I think with that Wisconsin squad, um, and having to play the schedule in the Big Ten. I mean, obviously the two big ones there are going to be Ohio State and Oregon. Michigan with no slouch either. So they took two out of those three. Um, I don't think probably many people had that on a single card at the beginning of the season. So I think that one deserves second kudos. One, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a disappointment, but a fringe disappointment based on the roster and the coach. I thought Texas Tech and Wilds might have been able to do better than 8-4. In real life, that team's got a great defense this season. I know that they have some limitations offensive wise, which hurts in the game, but unfortunately, he has Oklahoma, Utah, BYU, and Kansas State as losses. All obviously very strong squads. That Kansas State squad is always underrated, in my opinion. They play everybody tough. But you would have liked to have seen him maybe win at least one out of those four, maybe two. But he's been in the conversation playoff wise most seasons. So I think it's a little bit of a down year for him. Hopefully he comes back. I don't think this one was necessarily unexpected, just when you look at who all is on the schedule in conference and the team. But I was a little bit surprised to see Freak at 0-11 and having to go into the last week of the season to pick up a W. Again, a lot of higher end teams compared to Syracuse roster talent wise, but hopefully Freak can turn it around for next year. I think you guys pretty much hit all the rest of them. The only other one that I would maybe say, again, another tough schedule, and somebody who always schedules well out of conference, and who's, in my opinion, another one of the top players in the league. But again, I know other people have pointed out, got to have buy-in from him. But I would still love to see Vegas at Tennessee perform better than 7-5 on the schedule, and I know that he can. I know that he's been extremely busy with life, and that's a huge part of it. So I'm hoping that next season see a little bit of a turnaround and a stronger effort out of nine. That's all I got.
Yeah, I feel like you guys kind of hit it on the head. There's not too much more for me that I can add in. I'm pretty sure somebody briefly touched on Morton, Oklahoma. I thought that was a pretty good surprise and a great performance this season so far from Mort, and hoping to see more from him in the postseason. I think he squeezed in with Maryland at the very end of the season, the final season poll at 25 for the coaches. Then took over an unranked Oklahoma team, and the SEC, as we know, is always stacked. So, as much credit as it is to Mort for being a solid coach and being able to get a team like Maryland in the top 25, I honestly had some doubts as to how that would translate over to a conference like the SEC. So I didn't have too high of expectations for Oklahoma, and for me personally, he blew it out of the water. I know right now he's top 10 in the coaches poll, and he has a real shot at making the CFP and potentially making some noise there for the first time in his NDL career, I believe. So big shout out and congrats to this performance so far. Moving over to... Yes.
One more thing on Oklahoma while I'm thinking on. I just want to say too, if you think about that, we're already talking about him as having somewhat of a surprise season or a good strong season, just compared to him. But talking about how just as in real life, they say every play matters. Can't take a play off. Every play matters in the NDL too, because Mort lost on some walk-off EA nonsense to a certain degree, despite there being maybe some game management things I could have provided or prevented it earlier. But I mean, we're already talking about him being a surprise, and he's one play away from being 10-2 and having one of the signature wins of the season. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. That, and to me, it's just crazy. Where 9-3 is not a bad season in any capacity, especially in the SEC. But it's just amazing how one play takes you from that 10-2 with that huge win to 9-3, where you're still strong resume, but you don't have that defining win maybe that you could have. So just crazy how those little last things, and even though there's a lot of conversation whenever these kind of high profile games come up with game management. And so as somebody who's not good at the game and who has had to take game management a lot more seriously to help limit some of my issues, It's fun to see that still play out in the video game, just like real life, where you really can help yourself by playing that last 2 to 3 minutes of game right, or you can really hurt yourself. So fun to watch that kind of thing play out.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to that either. So I can definitely agree with you there, and especially being right on the CFP bubble right now. I think the latest reveal had him at 11. So it really depends on how things shake out with conference championships, but he's right there on the bubble, and obviously coming down to one play and getting a statement win would change that narrative completely. So right now he's on the hot seat for that. But yeah, regardless, great season. Moving into a couple ACC teams I want to talk about. Someone briefly talked about Virginia Tech. 2-win goal over there, I believe, and they smashed that 8-4, 7-1 in conference, tied for first. It came down to the most specific tiebreakers. I'll never entirely understand how conference commissioners in the real world decide what order of tiebreakers go. But I believe for this one, if I were to have won out, I sadly didn't because I was really hoping to make some chaos occur. I think that tiebreaker would have been conference opponent win percentage, so the record of your opponents. Um, but that would have been really fun and chaotic to see Chase and Virginia Tech at 8-4 trying to battle for a potential bid to the CFP with a 2-win goal team. But regardless, great season there as well, and looking forward to see what he does next season. And then a little bit of an underperformance. NC State. I think I had Holme at 13 or 14 in my preseason poll. I thought he had a real argument for contending for the ACC in what felt somewhat like a down year for the conference. Yeah, 2 strong seasons in 32 and 33 back to back with CFP appearance. So kind of felt like he was on the same trajectory this time around. And then we get to week 1, and you have a turnover prone offense that gets upset by East Carolina. And I feel like that kind of set the tone for the rest of the season. Right now he's looking down the barrel of 3-8. He's had a rough go with a couple of games not falling his way in close possessions. Hopefully he can stick around and continue the NC State dynasty. I don't think one bad season in a league with matchups and results as volatile as this one means a whole lot about how you'll fare in the next season. I know he's had some great seasons at NC State, so I'm hoping for the best in terms of a turnaround for NC State over there. Moving on to the next topic, I feel like we've talked about a little bit when we were going over the conference championship previews, but G5 teams, as of the most recent coaches poll, I want to say there are 6 G5 teams in the top 25. Most of them are kind of cluttered around that low teens to early 20s. So nothing too incredibly high up the poll. No one elite performer, but a lot of really solid teams that have staked their claim in the top 25. Do you agree with having that many G5 teams? Are all of them deserving to be there? Do you think in general the G5 is getting too much, not enough, or just the right amount of respect right now? And I think we touched on it as well, but is there any G5 conference that you think is particularly stronger than the others right now? We can start with DK if you want.
Well, I've always been a stickler when it comes to the G5 conference, being a G5 conference commissioner. Um, I am strongly, uh, I strongly lean towards overall performance. That's why for me, it normally takes about until week 6 that I even start considering, putting in G5s into my top 25 poll. Um, unless one of them have like an outlier game like East Carolina did against, a Power Four conference school. That might shake things up for me. But looking at the schools and where they are right now, with East Carolina being ranked, South Florida, Temple, looking at these schools, I don't feel that their ranking is unjustified. I feel like they've put on, stellar performances. They've had really good seasons. I think things have lined up the way that they have. The only G5 school that I'm a little surprised at not seeing ranked is Central Michigan. He's normally always ranked. He has been since he's been at that school at towards this part of the season. This is the first time I can think of since we've been back that I have not seen Chip ranked at the end of the season. So that is a surprise there. And as far as like which conferences out of the G5s are the strongest, the American Conference gets a really, really strong nod. A lot of solid coaches there, a lot of solid teams. I mean, you got East Carolina, South Florida, you have Memphis, um, and Tulane. Like the schools themselves are solid schools. Um, so that's like with some solid coaches. So that's a little bit of a tougher conference to be in. The MAC tends to have a lot of solid coaches and teams that go there. With Chip always being there, Buffalo is a solid team, like we've talked about with their overall roster. Toledo is pretty good. Western Michigan is not that bad in all honesty, and Conference USA, Liberty, solid team. Um, who else was doing pretty well there? I want to say Western Kentucky was doing well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I'm trying to think. I mean, typically when you think about strong G5, you want to think about Mountain West, but honestly, they've seemed kind of quiet this season, outside of Fresno State. But you haven't really. Well, I can't really say that. I mean, Iraka, he's pretty much been an 8-4 team since he's been there. I think so. I don't know. I guess since it's not um the 11-1 or the 12-0 or the 10-2 like some of the other conferences have, that's probably why we don't talk about the Mountain West as much. It seems like a lot of their teams end up around the 8-4. I think this is the first time I've seen a team at the top that had more than 10 wins um, in the Mountain West. I can't remember, but I think this is. But I would have to say American, MAC, then Mountain West. No, then Conference USA, then Mountain West. In my opinion, as far as how I would stack the strength of the G5 conferences.
I can see that. Drew, yeah, if you wanna go ahead.
So I mean, DK pretty much said what needs to be said there. But so I missed the first little bit. I was on a quick phone call for work. So I want to answer. This is the full question, right? We're talking about the 6 teams in the top 25. Do you agree with that as well as the conference strength?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
you're right
accurate?
on.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I'm actually one of those guys that has several G5s in. I'll just go ahead and I'll tell you right now. I just did my voting, and I went ahead and I put USF, Temple, ECU, Buffalo, Fresno, and Southern Miss at the end of my rankings. Um, to me, the top 25 AP poll should be treated differently than the college football playoff voting. I know how obviously that kind of voting is voting for everybody, but it's all on your own principles. But I view that the top 25 as more of a merit base. And when you, even though these aren't great teams, when you compare them relative to everybody else they're playing who's similar, they still have very successful seasons. And so the AP poll is more of a participation trophy these days of sorts in terms of rankings. So I feel like people that have had good seasons and put up a record probably better than what we would have expected relative to the schedule and whatnot, deserves to be recognized. So obviously the top of the polls are always going to be reserved for the truly elite teams, but I think that the guys that have had good seasons deserve the recognition in the AP poll, and then we can leave the real consternation about who's the best in DFT. Um, in terms of the conferences, DK already hit it. The only thing I would say that's just interesting is comparing real life to the league. Obviously, obviously we have 3 seasons per actual game cycle, and so it could change each season, right? Obviously, a lot of that for us is dependent on coaches. But I know DK had mentioned that the Mountain West, you're used to that conference being strong, and I would agree. I would just say I think that's something about real life that even impacts the NDL in terms of team talent and stronger conferences. Is you look at the Mountain West, and I don't see too many programs that have a big NIL war chest. But you look at the American, and you got Memphis isn't afraid to spend. South Florida's spending. There's a lot of teams there that are committing money for future gains. So I think that we'll probably continue to see the American be the bell cow of the G5s beyond this season even. Not to say that there aren't great coaches in the other ones, but yeah, I think the coach movement for the NDL purposes has the most impact on that. But as each game cycle comes, I mean, right now a lot of people would consider North Texas to be a strong team in the American based off the roster, but they just got decimated by the portal. So next game cycle, you're going to see them be one of the worst teams in the game against Providence. So it's just interesting how all that plays. The real life aspect plays into our video game world as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the American definitely has the largest bank, I guess you could say, in terms of good teams player rating wise. I know you mentioned North Texas probably won't be in that carousel next time around, but at least if you're looking at it right now and looking at it for next season while we're still in CFB 26, Tulane, North Texas, Memphis, South Florida, ECU. For a G5 conference, there's a lot of nice looking teams, especially for coaches that maybe want to draft for G5 and are a little bit put off by the pressure and competition in a larger power conference, but still want access to a team that's fun to play with and won't throw the ball 15 yards off of the mark that you're hoping to get to. But yeah, I like the American a lot. I think there are a lot of G5 teams that could have made some noise if just one or two plays goes completely differently. Memphis, I know that they're probably not talked about too much in terms of top 25 potential, but they had a 1 point loss to Mississippi State, who is currently, number 9 in the CFP, 12 in the AP. I think that deserves a shout out. San Diego State, the Mountain West in general, like you guys said, usually hovering somewhere around 8-4, 9-3. Not too many teams you typically see hit above double digits, but they still have respectable power game results. San Diego State, 7-point losses, one on the road to Pittsburgh and then one against Cal, so 2 ACC teams that they fought down to the wire that could have gone a completely different direction. Central Michigan, a 2-point road loss to Michigan State. So there are a lot of G5 teams that I feel like don't get a lot of recognition because at the end of the day, the win-loss column is less than what you would want to see out of a quote-unquote competitive or successful G5. But I feel like you can find so many examples around the league right now where games have become a lot closer than you expect and are nail biters, but that kind of go unnoticed because at the end of the day, the G5 couldn't pull off the upset. But overall, like, a lot of competition is coming out of the G5 and you love to see it. So I definitely think having 6 teams right now is warranted. Somewhere around that, you could probably even argue more because Central Michigan isn't ranked right now, and that gets you up to 7. But they've definitely proven that they can hang with the stronger teams despite such a great disparity in overall player quality between G5 and P4 teams in this game. Moving on to the next topic, For teams that have gone through coaching changes during the season, is it better to evaluate these teams based on the current coach or the overall team resume? And should old coach wins be vacated if they were removed for any involuntary reason?
I don't think coach wins should be removed. No, if they're removed for any type of reason, most of the time when a coach gets removed, it's because of themselves. So I don't think what they've done previously before they get booted out should be, taken off the record.
Okay, for me, I look at this question differently. Okay, I'm looking at it as when you say take the team's wins out of consideration, you're talking about it's a new coach. That coach didn't did. Are we looking at going forward instead of looking at the past? It's not about like the overall team's resume. It's just about when it comes to voting, for instance, like when you go to vote for a school and that coach may have he comes in and that team is 3-0 and then he loses the game, are you going to vote based on the game that he lost, or are you going to take those wins that were there before him into account? That's kind of what I'm looking at that question posing. But when it comes to new coaches stepping in, I'm completely looking at the new coach. Screw the team. I need to see what the coach can do with that team. Because as we have seen, there's teams who have like Georgia Tech, probably one of the worst defenses in the game when it comes to a P4 school, but the team itself, because of the coach, has performed pretty well. So I'm looking at the coach before I look at the team because there are guys in here in the NDL, which makes this league fantastic, that can take mediocre teams or mediocre offense or mediocre defense and turn them into a stellar performance. And so that's why I look at the coach first and look at what they've done with other teams. What should they be able to do with this team based off their resume or their past performances? And then I look at how are they doing as the season goes on and, kind of go from there. So when a new coach comes in, yeah, I can't take into consideration what the team has already done because it's already there. You can't take it away because it's there. But we need to start looking at what are you going to do from this point forward, and that's kind of where I think some of us go because it's like it only takes like 2 games for us to see what you're going to be able to do. And the downside to that is a coach that comes in, let's say mid-season, you're going to be playing against coaches who have already had like 5 or 6 games to figure out their team, figure out their offense, figure out the defensive pieces, and you're just now going to, have to step in and put those pieces together. That puzzle is going to be a lot harder for you to structure than it is from some other teams and other coaches because you don't have the same timeline. That's why I don't expect like it's a rarity to see like for instance ain't coming in at UGA, it's a rarity to see a coach come into a team like that and then finish the entire season undefeated or some mess. Um, like because like I said, you're coming in late and you're starting late, so you're already behind the ball, and it's a lot harder to get things going than it is for people who've already started that process. But I mean, I think what we probably have to take into consideration with this conversation is let's say we have a coach that comes in, his team is 3-0, or let's say they are, 0-3 or whatever the case may be, but that coach does actually come in and finishes the season undefeated. Like as far as they are concerned, where does that put them with those other games that they had nothing to do with? That's kind of where I'm at with this conversation and that topic. That because that would be like the hard or the more challenging conversation to have to figure out, especially when it comes to like top 25 or CFP conversations with those teams.
Yeah.
I'm
DK,
with
and I'm
you.
gonna
That
I'm gonna piggy on that
oh,
if I could.
go ahead,
I,
go
I
ahead,
was
go
I
ahead.
mean it had taken a while. I was actually kind of surprised that it took that long into the conversation for the CFP to even be mentioned. But I would say two things about this subject. Well, three. I would say I don't even hadn't actually even considered it just in the light you guys were talking with top 25 voting. I had actually only thought about it since I had been on previous committees about how that impacts the college football playoff, since that's the end result for the season, right? I think a lot of the coach turnover we see ends up being for mid and lower tier programs that, you know, maybe after the season we're all like, oh yeah, that coach is gone or whatever. But obviously, if somebody leaves a Georgia or lat 2 seasons ago, was it? We had the Ohio State coach disappear, and Ohio State didn't even play a season. So um, it's a lot harder when you have playoff teams that you're looking at in this light. Like, I'm not saying a playoff team with a coaching change. I'm saying coaches that are playoff eligible or in the playoff right now that have had to play a team with a coaching change. And I can just tell you that it's not easy for a committee to determine what to do with that. As an example, right, a couple of years ago, uh, Oregon didn't have a very strong resume because they weren't able to play that Ohio State game, and ultimately it didn't impede their ability to succeed at all, and they still did. But there was definitely a time on committee where, you know, their positioning within the bracket was in question. Um, and just as like a league as a whole, right? I think when you look at the coaching turnover change, obviously there's obviously going to be life circumstances for everybody, but I think sometimes life circumstances are different, and so I think it's part of it is also just continuing to try to find quality coaches that want to be here for the right reasons, aren't serial rule breakers, hence the reason they're getting kicked out. I mean, there's just so many things to it, but at the end of the day, it really does have an impact to ability to impact what we're doing here. And so it's just one of those things where you'd love to see it not happen, but it does. And when things like that come up, I just hope people can see how that can play into decision making for CFPs, et cetera. And we maybe don't always land on the right answer when you're having to compare, say, I think a Clemson who played a Bucknut at Texas A&M early. Somebody had played Bucknut early in the season, and so like Bucknut was a good coach. Who's this coach? For the CFP, you can't really do that, right? You have to look at the resume as a whole. You're not supposed to treat it as who's the coach, this, that, and the other. So it's hard because, you know, you may be punishing a guy based on the fact that the CFP looks at the season resume as a whole, and that may not have all been the responsibility of that one guy. So that's my soapbox on that. I just think that it has more impact on the league than it should sometimes, and it's unfortunate.
And to piggyback off that, what DK said, yeah, if a new coach takes over a team that's ranked or that's close to being ranked, yeah, I'm definitely judging that new coach because it seems like a lot of times when a coach takes over a ranked team, it doesn't go well. They like immediately loses that first game. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely am judging the new coach when we're doing the top 25.
Yeah, to Drew's point about the Texas A&M situation, that's one of the main things I wanted to touch on, and one of the reasons I posed this question in the first place. So the situation with that was Clemson was a team that lost to Texas A&M. Clemson traveled on the road to this game, lost by 7 against Bucknut, and then um, shortly after, I think it was week 5, I believe was the first week that the new coach Irish came in, and after a 3-0 start, they lost every game since except for Florida Atlantic, which was a sim win. So at least in all the games that they played, uh, they have lost, and I don't think any of them have been particularly close, except the road game against Auburn, which was a 3-point loss. So, needless to say, that resume, if you're looking at it as a whole, has kind of gone down the drain. Um, where I kind of disagree is I think the head coach is a part of a team's resume as a whole. I think if you're not looking at who the coach is behind a team and how that impacts a team's overall ability to play and win games, then I don't think you're actually looking at the resume holistically. You're just looking at numbers on a screen and you're not factoring in other things that go into a team. Because how I kind of view it is if Nick Saban were to leave Alabama in the middle of a season, they're undefeated, and gets replaced by a new coach, and that new coach doesn't win a single game. Do you expect me to believe the CFP committee in real life is going to say, you lost to Nick Saban, Alabama by one possession on the road? That's a dog shit loss now, and I'm not considering that anymore. You're out of the CFP. I don't think that should be how it plays out. If I'm seeing a dominant coach that has won back to back NDL championships, they're undefeated this season, and they play a very close game against another highly ranked team, and they're gone, I don't think you can discount that game because you're not looking at that team holistically anymore from my perspective. So, at least how I think it, I think that coaching does play a large factor in a team's overall resume and overall performance. It's not just down to the numbers on the box score and how a game ends up in the end result. I think that there are other factors at play that you have to consider when you're looking at trying to decide the best 12 teams to represent the NDL in the CFP.
Yeah,
Oh, go
with
ahead.
with you guys, I sorry, I'm this part is a little touchy for me. Like
Yeah.
I agree with what everybody is saying except for one thing. Like because I'm hearing some stuff, and then it goes back to reminding me of when Penguin was talking about quality losses. Loss is a loss. It doesn't matter if it was to a great coach and all of a sudden, a replacement coach comes in and that coach does horrible. You lost that game. I don't care. Um, but it does look differently on the flip side, though, to me, or at least in my opinion. If, like, say, take for instance the Clemson and Texas A&M. Let's say Clemson beats Texas A&M with Bucknut, and then later on it gets replaced to another coach, and somebody else beats Texas A&M or loses to Texas A&M, whatever way you want to look at it, but it's to a lesser coach. Um, that's the only time I can look at the quality of the coach as far as like the win loss part. Because yeah, this person beat a quality coach, and then that next person, um, beat a not so quality coach or lost to not so quality coach. I can understand the disparity there. But if you lose to a good coach and a good team, and then that good team has a crappy rest of the season because they got replaced with a coach that wasn't as good, I mean, it's still a loss. That's just the way I look at it. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you won by a touchdown or lost by a yard, it's the result's still the same. Um, Now, should you? Only reason I say that is because I look at the coaches when it comes to the resume of what we are putting that team for. Like I think Drew said it when it comes to the CFP aspect of it. Okay, I can get that, but yeah, the as far as looking at a team's overall resume, and I mean, if you're going to do that, do it as is. Like for instance, with me, Um, I had a horrible season with Vandy. I mean, not really horrible. I mean, there were some games that was just. Anyways, my very first win was against a ranked BYU on the road, and the rest of BYU's games, he's no longer ranked, and so it's like I got that one quality win, but it changed everything else. For the rest of the season for anybody else that was going to face BYU or for BYU facing anybody else, but it's like you have to take it for that game. You can't look at the rest of the games unless you're looking at that team's specific overall performance. But as far as if you're looking at Clemson and what Clemson has to do in their results from that Texas A&M game, look at it for what it was, who that coach was at that time, and that team at that time. Don't take the future in the consideration, or the present into consideration. We have to look at that game at that time the way it was then, and take that into account, and then move forward with each game from that moment on. It's like, I guess you could say, like a case by case basis. Um, that's just kind of how my brain evaluates it, but at the same time, I hyper focus on things. So yeah, I would get stuck on the one game before I even look at anything else. Unless we're looking at that one game and we're looking at the fact that, okay, he lost to Texas A&M with Bucknut, and Bucknut got removed for violations of rules. Now, do we want to go and comb through that game and see if he violated any rules in that game that could have actually affected the outcome of that game? Again, this is how my brain works, and I start digging rabbit holes. But that's where I would go with it if we're talking about things like that. Okay, I'm getting off the soapbox now.
No, you're good. 100% agree. Um, yeah, the rule breaking is kind of an interesting point, and part of the reason I raised the thing about potentially like voiding or vacating a coach's wins if they're removed for breaking a rule, straight up cheating, violating the rules in the game. Um, how those wins should be looked in the event that those practices were happening during that game. Uh, Obviously, that gets down to the nitty gritty. You got to do a lot of close review, um, and find a very clear consensus among, uh, let's say, the CFP committee if they're factoring in that game. So that's a lot of subjective, detailed work going on that I thankfully do not have to deal with because I am not part of the CFP committee. But yeah, it definitely raised an interesting point, and I'm curious to see how the CFP committee tackles coaching and team situations like that. I think right now, obviously, Clemson's a little bit on the outside looking in unless they lock in their auto bid by winning the ACC championship game. But in the situation that they don't in their bubble team, that could be an interesting conversation to have. Moving on to our last topic of the day, similar vein, talking about sim losses. So, when evaluating at large CFP bids, or just evaluating a team's overall quality in general, should sim losses hurt more than regular season or just regular normal defeats on a resume? Um, Specifically, I will call out, does a team like Rutgers and MJ Kemp, who already has a sim loss on the season, uh, deserve to be ranked the same way as a team that has a normal loss on their schedule?
Start. I don't mind.
Yeah.
That's obviously been a little bit. I mean, well, the last couple of nights that's been a topic of discussion, right? Uh, just from the fact that obviously MJ Kemp, who we just mentioned, has the highest profile game in the regular season that we've played. Um, Same type of deal, as a former committee member, looking at it from that light, kind of have to treat it a couple ways, I think, and just as a league as a whole, right? Stovine, you are one of them, right? We got guys that have shit happen. So if somebody has to miss extended time for a legitimate reason, uh, and somebody picks up a sim win from that, I'm not going to hold that against them. I'm not going to hold anything against somebody for having to take a sim loss that was for legitimate reasons either. Obviously, that may impact their ranking some, but I would weight a sim loss for legitimate reasons far less than I would um, a real loss or a no reason sim loss. And so I think that's where it kind of gets into the gray area and problems with a MJ Kemp type is that um, man's active in the league, active in the live chat, has been around. I don't go into other people's scheduling threads, but sounds like the game's been scheduled and then pushed multiple times on his accord. Um, and so you also have with certain guys, him as an example, start to see serial offenders, repeats. This isn't the first time we've had it with him. So I won't go as hard line as some people have had. I know Penguin said that anybody that takes a sim loss, you know, because they simply just didn't seem to try to get the game in, should be disqualified from CFP contention. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that I would absolutely weight a sim loss for no good reason much heavier than I would a sim loss because one of the two involved parties had something actual come on. So that hasn't. I'm not sure if that's ever been. Obviously, we've had guys not play the season like the Ohio State that impacted Oregon, but I'm just trying to think if we've had a guy yet that made the CFP with a sim loss on their resume. I don't ever recall that being a discussion that I had on a committee. So I do think that's interesting how that would be approached from a group standpoint and what that committee of, 10 or 11 guys ultimately decides is they're going to be their viewpoint on that. And if this is the first time, if I'm correct, and this is the first time that that's happened, obviously it's a pretty important decision because to a certain degree it sets future precedents, right? How are we going to treat somebody who, by all accounts, could have gotten that game in, but didn't seem to take it to the effort or level necessary to do so? It's going to be an interesting one, and I think we're going to see a lot more unfold from that within the coming week or two.
As a as
How
a
about
former as a former committee member with Drew, I agree with what he's saying. With sim losses and sim wins, we would have to know what happened in the conversation or what led up to the sim loss or sim win, the sim actually being happen. If it's something like, Swove and other people where life happens and you have to tend to a health matter or something like that and you couldn't get the game in, then that's perfectly fine because life does happen. But if you're active or you're active in the chat or you're actively pushing back games and it looks like you don't want to play that game and you take a sim loss, then yes, that should affect you because we're here to play the game. We're not here not to play the game. We're not here to dibble and dabble and oh, I want to play this person or I don't want to play that person. No, we're not here for that. We're not here for that. Now, disqualifying someone for taking a sim loss, no, we shouldn't go that far, but it should come up in the committee's discussion if that person took a sim loss and they actively didn't want to schedule that game. That definitely should come up because why aren't you trying to play your games?
Yeah, I gotta agree there. Depends on the reason for the sim, whether it's a fair sim, a full on sim loss, the context for what happened that led to the sim. Um, I think if it happens one time, um, I I wouldn't be too put off by it. It'll definitely hurt more than a regular loss. But I think having one sim loss and you just couldn't find a time to schedule, you get stuff going on in your personal life, what have you. I don't think that's the end of the world. I get that people have lives outside of CFB 26, and that not everything can always revolve around the game, and people have different priorities and things come up in life. So whether it's a fair sim, a sim loss, I think as long as you have open communication with your opponent, with the league as a whole, and you're at least putting in a good faith effort to try to get in as many games as you can, and it's not like you're trying to make up excuses or avoid a game or anything like that. I don't think sim losses should really be penalized too hard. I'm not gonna harp on anybody for having a sim loss here and there. I know damn well how hard it can be to find time to schedule a game, regardless of whether it's a super pressing issue or you just don't have the motivation to play the game sometimes, get a little burnout. You may have played, several back to back seasons, and sometimes it's hard to always prioritize the game week in, week out and try getting your game. So I understand that, especially with the smaller windows this season for playing games during a block. Sometimes that can be a hurdle to fitting things in at the right time. But yeah, ultimately, I feel like it comes down to effort and communication. And if you're not putting in the effort to at least find a solution to your scheduling challenges, you're ignoring your games, you're procrastinating, you're not being responsive to your opponent, um, or just not communicating in a mature manner or anything like that, it'll bite you in the ass. I don't think being penalized for that is entirely out of order. But with that,
This
oh yeah,
process that we
go
that
ahead.
yeah this oh my bad I
No, go
wanted to
ahead, man.
chime in on this last little piece.
Yeah,
This process that we put in place to help move the league season along, plus also help the CFP. Now, there's easy steps to this. If you see that a team has a sim win or a sim loss, the first thing to do is look at the score. The score will give you an indication of whether or not that win or a loss was negligent or if it was one that you need to look into. If it's more than, is it 24-21? 24-21 lets you know that it was a fair sim. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I need to look into that. If it's higher than that, like I think it's 27 or something like that, that lets you know
24, 24/7.
24/7. Okay. So that 24/7 lets you know that whoever got the 24, they were the active coach. Whoever got the 7 was not. So if that team that you're looking at had a 24-7 loss, sim loss, then that lets you know off rip before even getting into anything that that was a negligent sim loss. That person did not put in the effort. That person did not do what they needed to do in order for that to be a fair sim. But that right there eliminates some of this legwork for you right there. But if it is a 24-21, okay, now I can look into this. Let's see. Most of the time, it's going to be scheduling complex if it's 24-27, and that we can just understand. I mean, I'm not going to harp on somebody who, they just couldn't connect. I mean, it happens. It's life. But it's those 24-7 losses that we need to take into consideration and look at. When we see those, that's when the eyebrows need to raise, and we need to go ahead and say, haha, okay, this person, that's a loss that we need to like actually ding them for, because they didn't even put in the effort to get this game in or do whatever they needed to do on their side. So those are the two things that we have in place that kind of help give us clear indicators of how we need to look at a game and process the game. And once we see that, we can kind of go from there. We know which direction we need to go into. But especially the 24-7, that's a clear indicator for anyone looking at a resume of what that team has done or how that loss should be looked at.
Definitely, I agree with that.
yeah, good way to put it. Um, and a good way to end things for this week. I know we kind of rambled for quite a bit longer than we usually do, but I thought it was all good conversation. I think it was a good way to play catch up on some missed out weeks and episodes. So hopefully the extra long conversations and extensive topics was something that everybody liked to hear. Um, but I want to say before leaving, thank you all for joining me and taking the time, as always, out of your busy days to have a chat about what's going on in the league. And I appreciate your input as always.
No problem at all.
Thanks, fellas.
Yep.
Thank you
Have a
guys.
good one, boys.
Thank you all.
Y'all
And I
have
Guys,
a
will,
good
enjoy.
one.
yeah, you as well. I see you all next episode.